We now look at discussing a few statistical functions around stock prices, returns, and any set of data for that matter. Stock prices and returns just become one immediate way of analyzing these functions and using these functions. But statistical functions could be useful in a variety of applications where we are trying to find averages and variations and standard deviations around stuff. We already have seen average kind of a formula. We'll quickly recalculate those data points as well. What we have here is the last 3 months or so. There's a 3-month period over which we have Nifty data. Now, Nifty is the stock market index in India. This is the index created with the top 50 companies on the National Stock Exchange, right? So we have an index set of values which are there. There are a few things which are good in terms of Excel practice. If you look at this data, there's one decimal point here, there is nothing here, there are two here, there's one here, and two here and nothing here. So it kind of creates data in a format which is not very readable, right? It might be a good idea to probably select this entire set and put the same number of decimal points, either 0 or 1, right? So we put 0 and now it looks much more readable as you look at it. What we did was we just selected by pressing Control Shift down, came up to this panel here, pressed on this comma sign here. So the formatting kind of changed, and once we pressed on that, it gave this because it adds 2 decimal points by default. We reduce the number of decimal points to arrive at this number, right? Now we calculate what is called as Nifty Returns. How do you calculate return on something, right? So if 100 changes to 101, the return is given by 101 minus 100 divided by 100, which is essentially going to be equal to 1%. That's what we are going to calculate. So the second day's value minus the first day's value divided by the first day's value is what we have to calculate, right? Returns, if you had invested in Nifty, then that's the second day's value, B7, minus the first day's value, which is B6, divided by the first day's value, which is B6, right? So we get this as minus 0. Obviously, this is minus 0 because we have not converted it to percentage and added a couple of decimal points. It's almost flat on this day. There's no movement in this index on this day. So the returns are almost equal as well. Now I take the mouse cursor here and you see the small black plus sign that has gotten created. Double click and it will calculate returns for all the days all the way down till the last date data available, right? So this is the data set that we have. Column C gives us the returns and we are more concerned about these returns. So we are looking at returns and we're going to calculate everything on these returns. So let's say we want to find out what are the average returns. For average returns, if you remember, we had this function called average. Select the entire data, Control Shift up again, and press enter. So the average return on this period is a negative number, minus 0.03%. And that's what happens because the index has gone from 8,492 on the first day to 8,318 on the last day. Then we look at what is the max return during this period. Maximum return is given by a function called max. You can select this data again. 1.84% was the maximum return. Similarly, minimum return is given by a function called min. And we could select the data again and get the minimum return. So the minimum return was minus 2.74% during this period. Now, in statistics, we can also calculate what is called as standard deviation and variance. Standard deviation is the deviation away from the mean. You will probably study about this a little bit more in your statistics course. The actual discussion on that is probably beyond this curriculum at this point of time. But the calculation of standard deviation of returns is essentially a formula called STDEV, and you can select this entire data using STDEV. There are a variety of pointers which are available there. Your standard deviation is 1.03% if you look at this. If you start typing STDEV, you see these functions that are listed below, .p and .s. Now again, beyond the scope of discussion at this point of time, if we select dot P, it'll essentially give us a slightly different number than if we select dot S. Dot S assumes that this is a sample and hence applies a certain formula for calculation. Dot